Welcome back. This is Life on the Rock. I'm Doug Barry along with Father Mark. We are your Rock House compadres. It is Pro-Life Month, January, big time, powerful time. Bryan Kemper and Rebecca Gabyrel here from Stand True Pro-Life Ministries. Good to have you on the show.
It's an honor to be here.
Thanks for being with us. And you've got quite a past. We're going to get into some of that, and you do too. You in this hunting for not Red October, but the religious life at one point for a couple of years. And now you're working full time for Stand True Pro-Life Outreach. A little bit about Stand True Pro-Life Outreach. Let's get right into it. Tell us a little bit about the ministry and how long it's been around and what you're connected with.
Well, I started in the pro-life movement back in the early '90s with Operation Rescue out in California. Involved out there with Jeff White, who was running Operation Rescue West at the time and sort of my mentor. And through that, I had a real passion for both pro-life and for music. Being formerly a drug dealer and involved in a whole lot of horrible stuff, music was a big part of my life, and I was working with Christian rock bands. So I called up some friends and some bands and said, hey, let's do a pro-life rock concert, you know? And they thought, oh, what a good idea. And it had some bands come together and put together this concert, and MTV actually called us up and said, hey, can we do a story about your pro-life rock concert? And Kurt Loder, the original MTV news guy.
Yeah, VJ.
Yeah, he talked about it and he's like Kemper, who sports a mohawk haircut and tattoos, and I thought it was funny the way he described me. And we did this first concert, and I remember it was the connection of one of the very first Christian rock bands I'd ever seen right when I first came to the Lord. The lead singer of that band was there in the audience, and he had brought a girl there who was considering abortion, and he told me later after the presentation that she changed her mind and decided to keep her baby. And a bunch of my friends said, Bryan, you got to keep doing this. This is great. And so we got a call then from Lollapalooza, which back then was the first traveling concert tour before Warped Tour and all these other things. And they said, hey, come along and do a pro-life booth along this tour. They put us right there in the middle of legalized pot and pro-gay marriage and Planned Parenthood and Rock for Choice and all this other stuff, and we were right there in the middle. They put us next to PETA because we had the images, the photos of the victims of abortion. Okay. So, and PETA had the images of the dogs that were stuff. So they put us. They thought, okay, these two could be together. But then, so I did that for 10 years, and then.
Hold on, that's quite a mix. I mean, what you just described, all these different groups. Who the name of those groups again, so the audience can really
Rock for
understand
Choice.
who this is?
There was several different pro-abortion groups, legalized pot and pro-homosexuality, and just every liberal thing you can think of, and us.
Rock for Life.
Right there in the middle of it. The founder Perry Farrell of Lollapalooza believed that every view should be expressed in their nonprofit zone. Interesting, the very first day we were there in Dallas, Texas, the lead singer of Green Day came up and threatened to urinate on us and said we don't have a right to our opinion. He told the crowd from stage to go beat us up and destroy our booth, but we ended up getting more donations that day. Like after the crowd came over and realized, oh, these guys are just expressing their opinion, we had over $200 in donations laying on the table. And by the time we got to Dallas, we were out of money. Like, we didn't know how we were going to get to the next spot. God always provides, but it was.
So the audience right now is wondering, did anybody threaten you, or did anybody throw a punch at you all?
No one threw a punch. The only threat we got was from the girls that were with us got threatened by one of these bands called L7, which were these women that make me look dainty. I mean, they were just tattooed, and they got threatened by that band, and like I said, the lead singer of the Green Day threatened to urinate on me. But other than that, actually, most people were like, hey, you guys are okay. I'll tell you, I've traveled the world for 20 years doing pro-life work, and the majority of the time I get people thanking me and saying they agree with my pro-life t-shirt. So yeah, it was quite an experience. We did 3 weeks on the road doing that Lollapalooza tour and continuing doing that work, and then.
And that was back in the 90s.
Back in the 90s, and then.
Okay, and then from Rock for Life, you move into.
Stand True, pro-life outreach, expanding more outside of just the music. Still work with a lot of the bands and stuff, but really wanted to reach out. My goal is to educate, activate, and equip this generation to be the generation that does end abortion. That's our goal. And so I started doing that, and we got help when I first started with a friend of mine. This is way before I was Catholic, but one of my best friends in the pro-life movement was Father Frank Pavone. And
we've heard of him here.
Yeah, he's people have heard of him here and there.
Yeah.
But we used to sit in the lobby of the Hyatt Regency in Capitol Hill during the March for Life and just talk about Catholicism and Christianity and pro-life, and he would answer my questions. Because when I first got involved with pro-life, I realized there was all these Catholics involved, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I got to get them all saved. Like I was like, whoa,
So
wait a minute.
You had a double mission here then.
Yeah, I had a double mission.
Yeah.
I had no idea what was actually happening. But so Father Frank would sit there, and he just so kind about the way he answered questions. And so we just sit and talk, and we became close friends and allies. I had actually met him when I was undercover as a pro-abortion activist in D.C., and I was standing there as a clinic escort at a Planned Parenthood, and he walked up, and I was really worried, and I pulled him aside and said, Father, I'm really pro-life. I'm just undercover. Don't. And that was how I met Father Frank. And someone else pulled him aside, told him who I really was, and stuff. So we just became friends. And then a few years ago, when Stand True was growing, and when God was showing me that there was this one truth, this one church, and I was done fighting against it, it was Father Frank who we talked a lot, and him and Teresa Tomeo, and we all sat in a hotel at a convention one night, and that was the final conversation that I knew it was time to come to the church. And so it was a perfect fit for Stand True just to come on board with Priests for Life and become the youth outreach. I mean, we already worked together so much. It was a no-brainer.
For the last 3 years, you've been connected now with Priests for Life.
Yes.
How long have you been Catholic then?
In February, it'll be 3 years.
Wow, congratulations.
So
it's fantastic. And introduce or tell us here, this young lady sitting next to you is Rebecca Gabyrel. What does she do for you?
Well, I met Rebecca back when she was a little teeny girl. No, not that small. She was a little girl, and she was running a Rock for Life chapter. Okay. And her and her mom up in Michigan, and then I came up and spoke for them up there. And her mom used to give me updates about her being in the convent. And asking us to pray for her in different situations and such.
This is one of these great stories, a great mix, great combination here. You know, it's kind of like you've got this background you've got where you're into drug addiction, and you were involved in some satanic activities,
yes,
things of that nature. We'll discuss that a bit too later. And wanting to save Catholics from the whore of Babylon and the Antichrist, whatever we Catholics are considered to be sometimes by a lot of people. And meanwhile, on the other side, you've got this young lady here who has been discerning the religious life. And now, tell us, Rebecca, you actually spent a couple of years in
I did. I spent a little over a year and a half with the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist, and it was such a blessed time. It gave me, since I had been so actively involved in pro-life, prior to entering, it was the perfect opportunity for me to step back and really develop a deep prayer life that now that I'm on the front lines battling, it just helps so much to be able to always go back to Christ and know that when we're praying the rosary or anything, especially on the sidewalk, that He's right there with us and we're rooted in Him.
What a great common denominator, considering your backgrounds.
I used to try to get her to go out on the road with us. We take missionaries every summer on these pro-life mission trips, and back before I was Catholic, I used to try to always recruit her.
Yeah, and I would never commit.
She never committed until I finally, when she found out I came to the church, she's like, all right, now I can think about it.
Yeah.
But so Rebecca, what got you to, how old were you when you started really getting on fire for pro-life work?
I had been involved in pro-life activities with my family since I was 5 years old, thankfully, my parents. But in high school is when I became actively involved on my own. And I would just say that I came to the realization that abortion broke my heart and I needed to do something. I couldn't just sit idly anymore.
Describe that a little bit. Teenager, and all of a
Yes.
sudden you feel your heart is broken. Was this like in a moment? Was it over time? Was this something gradual? Like a lot of people hear that type of statement and think, what was moving inside her that in her teenage years she would actually say that your heart was broken over this?
Yes. Well, in my early high school, when I was a freshman and sophomore, I was kind of opposed. Like I went because my mom would take me. It's what everybody did. But I would say towards the end of my sophomore year, we were attending the March for Life and doing different outreach surrounding that. And one, being faced with the amount of youth who were so passionately pro-life at the March just really touched me. But also, we had the opportunity to talk to so many women who had been hurt by abortion, and I also was sidewalk counseling at that time, and standing outside the clinic and watching these young girls, young women, all different women, backgrounds, everything, going in and killing their children and then having them come out. They were still mothers, but mothers of dead children, there really are no words to describe it. It's something that God does on each individual soul, and really, we should each take the time to pray and think about that, because it should break each and every one of our hearts.
Did you have a prayer life at that point? I mean, were you pretty consistent in your prayer life as a teenager?
I was going to daily mass at that time, and really discerning as well my vocation as I was actively involved in pro-life.
I mean, and that's a big part of it, isn't it? I mean, if our heart, I mean, the communication with God is there, as it was for you, and took it to the next step even of joining the church. But isn't that really, Bryan, what allows us to really see what's going on with the deeper, especially the spiritual battle behind something like this? Don't we have to have that communication with God to really get a grasp of this?
Oh, absolutely. I don't understand how anyone could, I mean, looking back at my life before Christ and stuff, how I survived 20 years. And doing this kind of work, if it weren't for Christ, there's nothing. I mean, whenever I go and give a pro-life talk, one of the rules is I give my testimony about coming to Christ first, because it's the most important thing that I could ever give to any young person, is that hope that is Christ. Even before the pro-life message, it has to be that. I remember I went to a college once that asked me, hey, can you kind of leave the God stuff out? So I could have doubled it. I refuse to leave that out. I can't do anything. I mean, I was a drug dealer. I lived on the streets. I was involved in some of the most heinous activities I couldn't even say on the air here. The crimes and the different stuff, and all the garbage that I went through. As an infant, I had spinal meningitis. I was declared clinically dead at one point. I was in the Special Olympics. I was considered partially retarded. I went through so much abuse as a child, and to be through all of that to where I'm at now, I've sang on albums, I've been in documentary movies, I was a regular on the TV show Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher, I've traveled to 29 countries in 49 states, I've written a book, I've accomplished so much. I'm married to a beautiful woman and have 7 children. None of that is possible but by the blood of Christ. And so for me, that's the most important thing to ever get out, is what Christ has done. And the only reason I can sit here today and talk to you is because of that.
Wow. All right, great place to stop, take a break, and to let people process and digest that. Don't go away. We will be back with more from Bryan Kemper and Rebecca Gabyrel and their Stand True Pro-Life Youth Outreach. Go take it to the streets in the world. Don't go away. Back after this. Welcome back to Life on the Rock. Doug Barry here, along with Father Mark Mary, the Rockhouse Compadres. This is our second segment with our guests for the show tonight, Bryan Kemper and Rebecca Gabyrel. And a couple of amazing stories you both have, especially because they're really so different.
Yeah.
Yes. Just slightly.
She was a wonderful lady all her life, and you were just terrible as a man.
It was the other way around.
Oh. No, but seriously, I mean, the grace of God, it's a great example of the grace of God working.
Yes.
And bringing people from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds, all different struggles and challenges, and getting us to a point where if our hearts are open to do His will, we can unite.
Absolutely.
We can really make things happen. And the March for Life was instrumental for both of you. Yeah. Talk a bit more about that. You said you were so impacted by just the numbers of young people that were there, and that really deepened it. Talk just a bit more about what that was like.
Yeah, it was just, I've been going to the March for Life since I was 10 years old. It's been something my family has done every year. In the beginning, my parents would take, a few of us older children. I'm the oldest of 6 children. But after a while, my whole family would go every year, and when I was in high school, all of a sudden it clicked, seeing all these young people who were there, and they weren't being forced to go by their parents. It wasn't something they were dragging their feet to do. They were there, they were joyful, they were on fire for what they believed, and that's contagious. That fire of the gospel that, it sets the world on fire.
Makes me think of Luke 12:49, I've come to the earth to set it on fire. How I wish it were ablaze. I wish it were ignited.
Absolutely.
and how we can do that to one another by the grace of God working through us. And the March for Life was instrumental for you, again, clearly, because you're hanging out there, you're bumping into, Father Frank and others. And talk a bit more about, again, the impact you as a younger man. How many years have you been going to it, for example?
I've been going since 1994.
Okay.
Since 1994.
Okay, so you got 20 years on your belt here then. And what was that like the first time you were there? I mean, coming onto the scene and seeing this.
Overwhelming it was absolutely amazing to see, because this was really pre-internet. I mean, there was internet, you had email, very few people had it.
But Al Gore hadn't really developed it to
No,
what
he
it is
hadn't
now.
invented it yet.
Yeah.
So, but okay, when I first started, in order to advertise a concert, we had to go to every different Christian event that was in the town for 2 months and stand outside and pass out these things they called flyers, and do these. The marketing back then was, but so you had all of these young people that were pro-life, but that weren't connected yet. They didn't have Facebook and all of this stuff to connect them, and so you get to DC at the March for Life, and you're like, wow, it's so amazing. It was so amazing to see that, and to be able to hang out with different pro-life leaders and go to the different events, because there's more than just the March for Life. There's so many events surrounding the March for Life, activism events and prayer events and rallies and nights at the Dubliner and all these different things that are going on at the March for Life.
It really kind of shows you, and Father Mark, you and I, we saw this in Rio, when your World Youth Day, we're on the beach there, and there's 3 million plus people from all over the world coming together.
Couldn't even walk.
No.
I mean, to get to the porta potties, it took an hour to walk through the crowd.
Right. When the night was over, just going back to the hotels, everybody in the streets, and people getting their wallets lifted. But here you've got this amazing energy, and these are opportunities to show us how the troops are out there. I mean, they're out there.
Oh, absolutely.
And these are events to bring them together, rally them together, just to say, okay, here we are once again. And we know that not everybody who would go is able to go or is there.
That's true.
You would have many, many, many more people from all over the world to these events. But they're enormous. They're very, very powerful. And speaking of the battle of this, because it is a battle, it's a spiritual battle. And the fact that you were both on scene there, seeing the troops come together in such a magnificent way, shows strength in numbers. But the visual moves the heart. And speaking of the visual,
absolutely,
let's talk about the visual of other things out there that we do need to see. And it's a controversial point, but it's on your website. And I think it's a powerful thing that needs to be discussed, because when it comes to the images of abortion, there are some who are just dead set against ever showing them, and then there are some who say this is all we need to show. And I think you have a really, really good balanced view of this, and I love your comparison. It's been used before, but you've actually been to these places. There, unpack it for us.
Okay. Well, the thing that most people know, the term that most people use is the graphic images. The graphic images. And there's been a lot of talk in the pro-life movement about that term and how that's really not an appropriate term to use. These are photographs of the victims of the abortion Holocaust. These are people in these photographs. They're not just graphic images. They're images of human beings who have been brutally killed. And they're powerful and they are life-changing. Father Frank Pavone, one of my favorite quotes from him is, "The abortion will not end until the world sees abortion." That's the truth. We need to show the world what's going on. If you look at, back in school, most people who learned about the Holocaust, one of the things that stirred us the most is when we saw those films, when we saw those images of the Jews that were killed in the concentration camps in Poland and in Germany. When we saw those things, for me, I know it stirred me. And when I had an opportunity, and I was over in Europe speaking at a pro-life conference, I went to visit some of these places. I went to the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam. I went to the Corrie ten Boom's house from The Hiding Place, if you've ever read the book The Hiding Place, and stood inside the wall where they would hide the Jews from the German soldiers with the Gestapo headquarters a block away. I walked through the barracks of Auschwitz. I stood next to the ovens of Auschwitz. I stood on the train track path at Birkenau. next to the building where they would take them in and tell them they were giving them that hot shower, where they would lie to them and play these mind games all the way up to the moment that they gassed them to death. And I stood outside that building at that camp, and I remember the image that was in my head was this house way off in the distance. And I was looking at that house, and I asked myself, what would I do if I lived during that time? What would I do if I saw this going on? If that was my house, I was a young Polish man. My kids are playing in the backyard. And I just kind of asked myself, what would I do if all of a sudden a Jew came running from a tree line, had just escaped, and said, will you hide me? Will you save me? Would I have done something? Would I have had the courage to stand up? Would I have had the courage to take him in? And then God spoke to me at that moment. He said, Bryan, that is your house. And I realized it was my house. Mm-hmm. This was your house too. This house belongs to all of us, because in our own backyards, here in America, there are these death camps, and they are called abortion mills. And human beings are taken into those places every single day, and close to 4,000 times every single day, the image of God, God's heritage, is ripped limb from limb. Children are being brutally murdered. We live in that house. And abortion remains legal 41 years later by permission of Christians who do nothing about it. If you take a map of any city, any big city, you'll put a blue dot for every abortion clinic on that map. You'll see a few blue dots. And then you put a red dot for every single church in that city. You will see an ocean of red surrounding those blue dots. Those blue dots should not exist if those red dots got out of their church, as Pope Francis said in Rio. Do you remember when he said, get out of your parishes, go into the streets?
Yeah, make a mess of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we need to make a mess of this abortion holocaust. We need to stand up, not violence, not going out and shooting or blowing things up, but through prayer. And can you imagine if every single person who called themselves a Christian here in Birmingham, Alabama, showed up at Planned Parenthood on Saturday morning? It would be closed, and babies would not die there.
And even, I mean, Bryan, because you've both done work so deep behind the lines, if you will, in this area, the men who are taking the women to the abortions, anybody we've had on the show, I've tried to ask that question. What's the percentage roughly of abortions that would not occur if a man in the life of that pregnant woman who was contemplating abortion were to step up and say, no, I'm not going to let this happen? And you'll hear 50, 60, 70% or more would not happen if the father of the child or the father of the woman or an uncle or a brother or some man just led the way and said, no, we're not going to do this. I mean, that's even an area to fight the abortion problem.
Absolutely.
Is to get to the hearts of the men to be the protectors and defenders we're supposed to be, and look into the eyes of those women and say, you're loved, you're cared for, that baby's precious, we're not going to let this happen.
Absolutely.
And for the men who were impregnating the women, who were the biological father of the baby, for them to own up to the life that they have taken part in creating.
You talked about your ministry, Battle Ready, and getting men to stand up and be men. You see them out there in the parking lot. They drop the girl off. They go to McDonald's, get themselves an Egg McMuffin, and they sit in the parking lot smoking cigarettes, eating their Egg McMuffin. And so many times we'll challenge them. What are you doing? You're a dad. That's your child in there. You need to man up and go in there and speak for your child. And when I have seen the men say, you're right, I need to do that, the majority of the time, they come out with the girl and they don't have the abortion. And that's so many times what she's looking for him to say, I'm willing to man up and be a father. Isn't
that kind of like the out of sight, out of mind with, not wanting these images to be seen? And the abortion industry doesn't want us to see these images. Just like the Germans in the concentration camps, as you mentioned in your description there, they kept playing the mind games with them because they didn't want them to see what was really going to happen. And the more we keep things hidden, the more they continue, the evil continues to crawl into the ground there.
I hate those images. I absolutely hate the fact that I go into my office every day and on the shelves and around there are photos of the victims of abortion. They make me sick to my stomach. I hate going to the abortion mill. I hate it with a passion, but it has to be done and they have to be seen. Now, not everywhere. That you don't want to show them every single place, but I think college campuses and different places, there's so many good places to show them. There's a time and a place, and we need to be wise about that. But they must be shown, and the world needs to see what abortion is, so we can fight it.
Yeah, this could be used. This expression, this understanding can be used with regards to even something as simple as marriage. We don't look at the statistics that anywhere 50, 60, and a priest in New Mexico told me in his diocese it was 75% divorce rate. 75% divorce rate. We don't talk about this enough. We don't talk about what's leading to these problems in marriages, and so a lot of young people are going into marriage woefully unprepared. And they get into the marriage, and then they start having these problems. Disillusionment sets in, which, we've both been married long enough. I have 24 years, you have 15 years with your wife, and my wife and I have been through the different stages. You have romance, and you have, they say, disillusionment follows really quickly after romance, and then it goes to agitation and frustration.
We never had that.
Yeah, you're still in the romance stage with your wife? That's awesome, good for you. I tell my wife, I'm still in the romantic stage. She's at the awakening stage, which is the last stage. But you have all these different stages, and they say that most people won't get past the third stage, which is agitation and frustration, because they haven't been trained properly. They haven't experienced any wisdom enough from the older generations to say that this is going to be part of your marriage. You're going to have these struggles. You've got to be prepared for it. Yeah. Again, it's a burying of the head in the sandbox, and I see the same thing with obviously the abortion industry. But it's in these different areas, and if we don't confront them and don't let these images, be it the graphic images of a concentration camp, or these images of these human beings, and I think that's the best way to put it, they're not just numbers, they're not just flesh. These are people.
Yes.
People, just like those, the people in the ovens, in the camps.
Well, Bryan, you also connected to the civil rights movement. Talk about that. What do you think about Vietnam, right? The news coverage there showing soldiers getting killed changed certainly back home, the response to the war, but also in the black civil rights movement.
Yeah, with the mother of Emmett Till, getting the magazine to show the photos of her son, the mangled body of her son, in that casket sparked the civil rights movement. And at Priests for Life, we work with Dr. Alveda King, the niece of Martin Luther King Jr., and she tells that story all the time about that and about how that was something that was so catalyst in the civil rights movement. And it's just important for us to use the tools that God has given us. And these children did not die in vain, and we need to honor them by this legacy of showing people to make sure that this doesn't continue to happen. I'm the father of 7 children, and I do not want to pass this down to the next generation. We have to be the generation that ends abortion.
Right. I agree with that. I just asked, we're going to skip the break because I want to go right into this. We've only got 16 minutes left in the show, and I just asked, and the producer said we can skip the break because I want to get back into this more in depth. Let's go back to you right now. You've worked in these situations in the streets in front of the abortion mills.
Yes.
What do you encounter when you're getting heart to heart with the women and when you're seeing the men in the midst of this? And this is really the moment of the battle. Right at that moment, that baby's life is on the line, but also really the lives, the emotions, the spiritual and physical aspect of these individuals involved in it are on the line too. What's it like for you, Rebecca, 21, to be out there in that fight?
It is, again, heartbreaking, but it's so beautiful to see the witness of those who do take to the sidewalks. While their numbers are few and we need more people to be out there, in Dayton at the abortion mill where we go weekly and pray in sidewalk council, there's a lady who goes every single day. That clinic is open from when it opens until it closes. She does not leave until the last woman leaves that clinic. And what a beautiful testimony that is, because the reason those women are there are because they're scared, they're alone, and they don't think anybody cares. But even though they may not realize it, there are people who care, and we do care. And just thinking back to this past summer, I had the opportunity, along with our summer missionary team, we were outside the clinic, and a young woman came out to talk to us, and we were really excited. And it turns out that she didn't have enough money for the abortion, and she needed to find somewhere to get a money order. So we were like, oh, we'll take you. We wanted to talk to her and help her. So we went and we were able to take her across the street to a pregnancy center. And just through talking with her, it was so difficult to see how scared and alone she felt. She felt she had no other choice, that nobody would understand. And she was crying tears of relief that somebody even cared. And she just kept asking, well, can I spend the day with you? Can I do all these things? And sadly, towards the end, what happened is she had been dropped off and was alone, and she started to essentially worry about when they came to pick her up that she hadn't gone in. So I cried and cried and cried after this happened. She ended up going back in, and I do not know if she went through with the abortion or not, because I didn't see her again. But just, it was a powerful moment for me to step back and realize how we need to be there for the babies, but we need to be there for the women and the men as well, because they are going to hurt and be in pain for the rest of their lives, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and nobody deserves that. They will be scarred, and we need to be there for them.
And that's a real moment of the battle, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
right there, what you just described, she wanted to spend time with you. She wanted to
yes.
have that association with
Yeah.
someone who seemed to care, showed caring towards her. And this is a pretty common theme.
Oh, absolutely. I can tell you, going to the abortion mill for over 20 years now, sometimes that's all it takes is just a kind word. I've gone up where I've asked a woman, hey, can I just pray for you before you go in? And they just break down. They just absolutely break down, because they think that no one cared about them, that they don't have value.
Right.
And that, to me, I relate that back to when I came to Christ. Like I was in a hospital, overdosed, almost dead from a Grateful Dead Bob Dylan concert. I took LSD and methadone and crystal meth and shrooms all in the same day, and ended up in the hospital. They were pouring charcoal water down my throat and trying to get the poison of the drugs out of my body. And a doctor took me outside, and he said, I want to talk to you. And I'm like, well, whatever, just give me a cigarette and I'll talk to you. And I thought he was just going to preach at me and tell me how evil I was and I was going to hell. And he just looked at me and he said, you know, God loves you. You are valuable to God. You mean so much to him. And I don't ever remember in my life people telling me I had value. And that changed my life. A week later, I came to Christ. And I think about that when I talk to those women, is we don't need to sit there and go, you're evil, you're killing your baby, you're a murderer. We need to show them that love and that hope that there is in Christ.
What that doctor did for you was a very pro-life move.
Absolutely.
Very pro-life.
Very pro-life. And the amazing part was when he shared that with me, the next day I got out of the hospital, my girlfriend picked me up, and I went an hour away to another city to go swimming in the ocean, because I love water. Water was like my therapy. And a boat came up beside me out in the harbor, and a guy in the boat goes, you were at the Grateful Dead concert yesterday. And I'm like, how do you know that? And he goes, I'm the fireman that put you in an ambulance and took you to the hospital. And he goes, do you know God loves you? And he said to me almost word for word what the doctor had said. An hour away in another city in the Pacific Ocean, okay? You can't write a movie like that. It was just so...
I was going to say, I just saw that in a movie.
Yeah. Someone stole my line. Yeah. No, it was amazing. And so I think about that when I go to the abortion mill and we talk to these women and these men. You know, with the men I'll be a little more stern, like you need to man up. But when we talk to these women, we need to show them that they're loved and that there is hope. And that,
well, Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. And, you know, men oftentimes respond to a caring man who will look at them in the eyes and say, you need to do better. You can do better. Now get busy doing better.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, I need that. I needed that when I was younger. You're a great...
I need that daily.
Yeah, exactly. My father says it to me all the time.
Yeah. Rebecca says it to me. All the people in my office tell no.
But, you know, you are a good example for anybody out there who's thinking, the pro-life movement is only people who have always had this God-fearing, loving moment. And then you hear that one case of an abortionist who converted, you know. You're someone who just came from the reckless, destructive lifestyle of drugs, alcohol, partying, and some satanic practice. And voila, God reached into you and still was able to pull something magnificent and heroic out. So what message would you have for anybody watching right now who might be concerned about, you know, children or brothers or sisters or, you know, somebody that they fear knows is off in this lifestyle that's so destructive, that there's hope, real hope.
Absolutely.
That God can reach the deepest, darkest recesses of destruction and bring us back? What would you say?
I would say never give up. Never give up. There were people that had given up, and there were people that didn't give up on me, and a lot of people praying for me for many years. And God can reconcile anything. I had one of the worst relationships with my parents, and now my dad and I have an amazing relationship and love him to death, and my mom too, and my sister, and all the people who I had burned all these bridges with. We have great relationships now, and it was somebody who showed me that love and that value, not preaching at me, but sharing with me that hope of Christ.
A lot along the lines, Father, what you said at the beginning of the show with the Holy Father, Pope Francis, about walking with us and walking with each other and helping each other along.
Yeah, I think so often that when people love us in this life, it awakens us to the fact that God loves us. Because that is the same love, right? It participates in that very love of God, and we encounter that in others.
And I think the same even goes with coming to the church. You know, it was not about this hardcore debate, Protestant versus Catholic or anything. You know, it was sitting down with Father Frank and people like Teresa Tomeo and just talking, just answering questions and just loving me where I was at.
Well, what happened? You said it was a week after you spoke with the doctor that you came to Christ. What happened in that moment?
Well, you know, the doctor had shared that with me, and then the fireman had shared that, and I went back home. I slept, I think, for about 2 days, coming off this high, and when I woke up, I went to get high again. I went to roll a joint, a marijuana joint with a line of cocaine in it, and as I went to light it up, I just started crying, and I had no idea why I was crying. And I reached in my pocket, and there was a piece of paper that the doctor had handed to me, and it was a phone number, and I called the number, and I just said, "Hey, I'm on drugs. I'm going to die. Can you help me?" And it was a church. And the pastor of the church said, "Be here tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Bring some stuff, some clothes." Went that night, my girlfriend and I went out to the beach in Bolsa Chica, California, got stoned all night at the beach. And then the next...
Knowing that you were going to go to the church the next day?
I didn't know what I was going to do.
Okay, so you weren't sure yet.
I just knew that if I wasn't there, I was going to get stoned. And that's what I did. Went to that church, and the pastor said, "We're going to give you a place to live. We're going to get you clean. We're going to provide you clothes, job, everything you need. The only thing we ask is do one thing." "What's that?" He said, "Can you just give God a chance?" I just kind of looked up and said, "All right, God, what do you got?" Very dangerous thing to do. Very dangerous thing to do. But I was there for about 3 days. Hated it. Absolutely hated it. I mean, the next day they woke me up before God was even awake at like 6 a.m. It's like when I went to bed. And the worst part was they're so happy. They just kept like hugging me and like, "Good morning, brother, hallelujah." These happy Jesus freaks.
Not quite the same as the Bill Maher show. Huh?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I just was like, "Don't touch me." Oh, I was there for a few days, and I remember at the night, around the third night, I started to shake, and I started to sweat, and my whole body was shaking and pouring out the sweat, and I was hallucinating. And I laid back on the bed, and I thought the tree branches were eating me, and I was going through some withdrawals. And they came in, and they just said, "We're going to pray for you." And they just started praying. And I remember I fell into the most beautiful sleep that I'd ever had in my life. And I woke up the next day, and the only way I can describe what happened is I woke up like a happy Jesus freak. I'm like, "Whoa, why do I feel this way?
Hallelujah, brothers.
What's going on?" I was just, yes, I was. I'm just like, "Tell me about Jesus." And they handed me a Bible, and I sat down at this long table, and I opened it up, and it said, "The Gospel According to John." And I just started reading, and I just read. And I fell in love with Christ on that day in 1987.
That's a big difference in discernment than you going in convent for a year and a half.
Yeah.
You know, I got to say, because people always tell me how great my testimony is and what God's done, but I look at someone like Rebecca or you or these people that have grown up in the church. I hit rock bottom. It was either death or God. I mean, there was nowhere else to go but death for me. I look at somebody who grew up in the church and who stuck with it. I think that's a powerful testimony for these young people who've grown up and didn't hit that rock bottom. Like that to me is even more powerful.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because the you know, the irony, the difference between you two here. You were in high school and moving towards death and destruction.
Didn't even finish high school. I dropped out. I just got stoned every day.
There you go. And you in high school had your heart broken because of this. And so when did you enter the religious life and discern that for a while?
I was a year after high school, so in 2011. Yes, in August 2011.
You spent a year and a half with the Dominican sisters. And what was that like? I mean, just to have that time there and
you know, it was such a gift, because we live in such a noisy culture, and you know, even doing the good work of pro-life and out and spreading the gospel, it's very easy to get caught up in what you're doing and not stay focused on God. So to have that time to step back and really develop a prayer life that was really focused on my relationship with God, and became less of what do I want and more of what do you want me to do now, God? And in listening to what He wanted me to do, it became very clear over that year and a half that He was like, well, you know what? I brought you here, and now that you're listening to me, I want you to go back out and work again. And honestly, it's been much more fruitful after having that intense prayerful experience than it was
but that
before.
formation had to be fantastic.
Yeah,
for
it
you.
was wonderful.
So what is your role now with the ministry?
I am the director of communications, so I work full-time with Stand True, and I do a lot of the office work as well as handling things that we do on social media. So if anybody is watching this, we're on Facebook, Twitter, please find us. And you know, it's just really been a gift to kind of see both sides of what goes on behind the scenes of pro-life in the office, but then being able to hop in our missionary van and go to events.
Right. Well, in the last few minutes then, you know, Bryan, what is where does Stand True go from here?
We just got finished with the March for Life and the Walk for Life and getting all that done, and so we're heading into preparing for our summer mission trip. We'll have young people come and stay with us in Ohio and train to be pro-life activists there. We have a missionary house there near Dayton, Ohio, so we're getting ready for that.
Right.
And find out more information on our website.
Okay.
One of the things we'd love to do for your audience, though, is one of our mantras is I survive Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade will not survive us. So we have this sticker here. I survive Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade will not survive me. I want to give a free sticker to anyone who emails us after watching this show today.
Okay.
So if you send an email to freesticker@priestsforlife.org, that's freesticker@priestsforlife.org with your name and your address, we'll send you a free sticker. Simple as that.
Excellent, excellent. And you're big on T-shirts too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a whole line of pro-life T-shirts. That's one of them right there. We have that up at our website. We have tons of different T-shirts, hoodies, bracelets, stickers, patches, buttons, my book, Social Justice Begins in the Womb, all sorts of stuff.
All the necessary materials to help fight the fight. And your website is?
StandTrue.com.
All right, StandTrue.com. Well, awesome, great stories, great work, great. Just keep going. Just keep plowing ahead, fighting that fight. God bless you both. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And you pray for EWTN, and we'll all be praying for you all.
Absolutely.
Thank
God bless you. Father, as only you can take us out.
Oh, may our Heavenly Father shine His face upon you. May He give you His peace and send His Holy Spirit into your hearts to strengthen and guide you in your work for the Lord. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. We'll see you next week.